Welcome to the next breakthrough with Sean Campbell. In each episode, we explore the stories and the strategies behind today's most impactful figures in business corporate leaders, entrepreneurs, and innovators. So, whether you're seeking inspiration, or you're an entrepreneur in need of some practical advice, or someone potentially interested in the future of business and tech, this is the show you're going to want to watch because we offer valuable insights and takeaways to help you get ahead. Today, we're uncovering the breakthroughs that drive success with our guest, Nader Yassa. Nader's journey is a masterclass in navigating the complexities of modern business. He was born in Egypt, raised in the US, and he built a foundation as a Big Four auditor. He became a global project manager, and he was also working for a major semiconductor firm. He's been a CFO, he's been a CEO, he's managed financial controls across 7 countries. He was the CEO of Transpac Aviation Academy, which is now AeroGuard, which is one of the largest flight training centers in North America. He's also a commercial pilot, and he's on his ranch at the 4Y Ranch in Texas as we speak. He's a Renaissance man, it sounds like. He's also the founder of Complete Financial Wellness, and we'll hear more about that today. Nader is embracing the latest technological advancements, including AI, to disrupt the financial industry. And he's really about helping families. He's helped over 1,000+ families put their cash flow logistics on autopilot. So join us today as we discover how Nader is turning financial challenges into opportunities for growth and innovation. So welcome to the show, Nader. Nice to see you again.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's been a while. We obviously had a chat a little bit before, but prior to that, I believe it was probably, I don't know, 1997 when we first met. So it's been a
Yeah,
number of years, couple decades. I feel
yeah,
like sometimes these episodes are like my walking down memory lane a little bit and going to
absolutely.
connect with people that I haven't seen in a long time, see what they're up to. And you've had an amazing career so far. You're working on helping families become more financial literate. So we're interested to find out more about that. You've worked and lived in a number of countries, from Egypt to Switzerland to the US. How are all those cultures shaping, who you are and how you handle money or how you speak about money?
It's really interesting because it's true. I worked in 8 countries, and moving from country to country, you see the cultural variables and what they set as their priorities. And certainly, we know the U.S. is the biggest market in the world. And so, since it's the biggest market in the world, it's subject to, the most marketing and the most influencing. And, if you look here in the United States, we have $540 billion a year, which is about $1.4 billion a day spent on sales, marketing, and influencing. And of course, as you move away from the United States, you move from Western to more, older cultures, you don't find that they're subject to that as much. And it's really what we're marinated in. Mentor quite a few young men, and I always ask them, if you take a chicken breast in the morning and you put it in garlic sauce, what are you having for dinner? And the reality is you're having garlic chicken. And it's really hard to get that off of that. So around the world, everybody marinades in different values. And when it comes to money, certainly here in the United States, we can see that a lot of people live on debt, and the statistics are pretty clear. But in a lot of other cultures, and actually most other cultures, this idea of selling your future by financing things that depreciate doesn't really resonate. As a matter of fact, in a lot of places, you can't even buy a home on credit. So what I see is that people really value time together. They value relationships. They value longevity of things. When, as we move more and more towards the West, where there's a lot of folks concentrating on marketing and making another dollar, and what I would sometimes refer to, I mean, is clearly I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a capitalist, but really, when you add a lot of what I would call unscrupulous capitalism, that you find that exists more as you move towards the West. And culturally speaking, it's a lot easier to talk to people, sometimes not in the States, because it's part of their culture that they don't buy things they can't afford, right? And in the United States, everybody's been really trained to buy things they can't afford. And
You
so
see a
it's,
lot of cash businesses in Asia, and you see a lot of family pooling of money, and you see that sort of mentality of, um, and maybe it could be considered sometimes a scarcity mentality, like say, okay, I don't want to spend because I don't want to take that risk. But then when you take risk out of it, you kind of remove opportunity as well sometimes. So, but to your point, in the US, yes. I mean, even from my own family experience, I've seen in the past where immigrant families, right? I was first generation in the US. My family would spend whatever it took to put me through education. Didn't matter if they went into debt. So there's
Mhm.
things that I think you invest in that will pay off in the longer term, but some things like the newer car or the best phone or whatever, obviously there's better decisions to be made, I think, when people are managing their money.
Right. And when your parents invested in you, what I would say they were investing in is they're putting their money in the right place. It's okay to borrow money if you're investing in an appreciating and income producing asset. And each of us are our own income producing and appreciating assets. So those are great things. When you put money in things that depreciate and don't produce assets and you do that more than the other, then you find yourself in a bit of trouble. And you and I've had the same kind of background, I think, in that regard, because I'm first generation as well. I came to the States when I was 2, and clearly education was number one. Well, actually, my relationship with God was number one, but education was right there, and
Mm.
that's the same thing. They'd spend every dime to do that before they'd ever buy a nicer car.
Yeah. They would give up their own comfort to put you through school if that's what it took. My dad worked
100%.
2 jobs for 15 years, just to make sure that I could go to and go where they thought would be the best, opportunities for me. So, like, that's
Absolutely.
hugely grateful for that. And, yeah, I had working parents on both sides, right? So, I mean, it didn't come easy, let's say. I would one point about that is that, financials you see in families, right? My own family and other families as well. There's this hidden kind of stress, which is the financial stress. Now that can affect families, but it also can affect, companies or other people that have to deal with the stress of meeting payroll or cash flow or whatever. And it can kind of kill productivity if people are thinking about that stress all the time. So how can leaders use wellness, an overall picture, not just your financial wellness, but other parts of yourself as sort of a strategic tool? Is that something you work with, or are you
Yeah.
focused on just the money aspect?
No, it's really true. Certainly I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, and there's a lot of psychology around that, whether we grew up with lack or we grew up with luxury and, how you think about money. But it's what's really interesting. And a lot of people have a lot of opinions. And actually, I wrote a post a while ago that talked about the fact that I don't have an opinion about personal finance. And you would think somebody that's been teaching personal finance for nearly 30 years would have an opinion, but my opinion would be as valuable as my opinion about math, right? It doesn't matter what my opinion is. Math is math. And so, what I try to point people to get rid of that stress, whether it's an entrepreneurial stress or personal finance stress, is really to look at what is. I heard a long time ago, it's really great. Stress is caused when the mind opposes what is. And what is reality. And so, when you look at a plan and you look at the efficacy of a plan and the efficacy of what's happening, whether it's a corporate budget, whether it's a pro forma, whether it's your personal financial budget and what you're doing, that plan has to have efficacy and it has to have efficacy within some parameters. Um, and so the more that they move towards reality and they accept what is, then they're really able to make decisions with confidence. But in order to do that, they've got to have a system and a methodology of knowing what really exists and what is. So, really, it's about what's the system I have in place that's giving me the information that, and that information is used to create a plan that has efficacy. And then the next step is in order for any project to be successful, it's got to have efficacy, number one, and the individual responsible has to perform, right? And I've been involved, in large scale international and domestic products projects for years, and those are really the two things that every project comes down to. Does the project have efficacy, and is the individual performing? That's it. If your project doesn't have efficacy, it's dead on arrival. If the individual doesn't perform, it's only for two reasons. One is that it's either will or skill. Do they have the will to do it? And do they have the skill to do it? And over the years, I found I can really help with skill, but it's harder to help with will. That's really more internal.
So you've worked with some large corporations managing billion-dollar assets for them. There's obviously systems in place and things that you do at that size of organization, but when did you decide you wanted to apply kind of that higher level systems to, like, individual families? What was the thing that made you want to do that?
It was interesting because about probably about 34 years ago, I stopped and and I were newly married, and I thought, man, there's just some very simple questions. Where does our money come from? Where does it go? How do I know? How do I control it? And nobody could really help me. And it was interesting because there was nowhere to go unless you're uber wealthy. There's not really a family office that's going to help you. And so I said, well, clearly this has been done before, right? This is not something I need to invent. And so I just looked at companies and I compared a company to a household. And it was really the same thing. In a company, you have a balance sheet. In a household, you have a net worth statement. In a company, you have a P&L. In a family, you have a cash flow statement. How does money come in and out? They've got assets. Family has, they have assets, and liabilities are liabilities, except in a household, they're called debt. And so really, when you look at how to manage those things, it's pretty much exactly the same. There's absolutely no difference because it is math and it's money. And so what I did was I took all of those things and I built them for household money management. And that was actually the name of the first company. It was called Household Money Management. Then it turned into Sage Financial. And then now we teach under Complete Financial Wellness. And really that's what happened is what controls can you put in place and reports can you give somebody so that they have control? The end result is what? The end result is really simple: making financial decisions and plans with confidence. That's it. And just like any project, if you've got the information and your plan has efficacy and you execute, you're systematically going to build wealth. That's really all I did. And so, clearly now we have a back end product that's patent pending. I have about 3 months to go on that. But the reality is, anybody that tells you that it takes a guru to do this is likely trying to convince you to do something or maybe sell you something. But the reality is, it's just math. It's money in, money out. What's left over is what you save. What you save is what you invest, and what you invest is what supports your family later.
It's really interesting. When I was growing up going to university and in high school as well, they give you some basic accounting courses and financial management, but only if you're really in a business undergrad. If you weren't, it wasn't really required, I believe, to take some of the courses that would help you, personal finance type courses. So you get a whole generation of people that, unless they're going down the business track, they don't really get educated on how to do it. Again, like if they're coming from a wealthy family and there's a family office and you have people that are running businesses in your family and are very good with finances, then that probably passes down. But there's a lot of families out there that are not in that situation and they just don't understand how to manage money at all. And the first thing you see when you're coming out of college is all the credit card applications, right? They just send as many of those. Immediately you're with student loans, you have a massive debt, then you're on your credit card and you end up saying it could take years and years, a decade to pay off your student loans, plus all the credit cards you ramp up. It's interesting. There's no incentive for those companies to help you be financially secure because then they don't make money. So yeah, it's really
Yeah.
interesting that there's no one really looking out for that individual. Who's the fiduciary for that particular household, and it sounds like that's kind of what you're doing.
Yeah, it's actually really true. As a matter of fact, I teach a lot of at universities and sometimes at high schools. High schools are a little bit early because there's no real high school student that needed to pay their bills, and it hasn't become a stressor to them yet. And so it's hard for them to really align a thought process with why this is so important. By the time they get into college, there's some more financial responsibility. Really, within probably the end of college, the first years of their professional life is when I really love to make an impact because they still have an asset that is really important and that's non-regenerative, right? And that asset's time. So the average person will work about 90,000 hours during their lifetime. And that's a really interesting number because nobody really looks at it. And what's interesting is I use this example a lot. I say, if I came to you, you know who I am, I've got integrity, I make good investments, and I asked you to write me a $10,000 check because I've got a great investment for you. You'd probably end up asking me about 50 questions. You'd want to paper it the right way. You'd want contracts and attorneys, all for $10,000. However, what's interesting is most people graduate and they go to work for the next 90,000 hours and never ask a question.
Mm.
And it's astonishing because the reality is it's not only the largest investment they'll ever make, it's millions and millions of dollars. Even at minimum wage, it's more than $1 million, right? So it's millions and millions of dollars, but you're also investing this asset that you don't get back, which is time. That's why I like to get those students really early, because then when I show them, hey, this is what you can do, this is the difference that you'll make with just a couple of small decisions. That's all it is, really. It's just these two small. So when I teach in these universities, I find a couple things. Number one, the teachers are actually more interested than the students because they're suffering, right? They've never been taught either. It's like, oh my gosh, I've never seen this, so clearly like this. And then back to what happens with those students and credit cards. The two biggest mistakes that most graduates make is, number one, they get a credit card and they put it in their pocket. That's the number one thing. As a matter of fact, what's interesting is if this was 65 years ago or so, we wouldn't even have this conversation because credit cards didn't exist.
Mm,
So, and then the next thing they do is they buy a car on payments. And
mm.
those two things set them off on this terrible trajectory. And when they start to realize what that's doing to them, it's really, it's enlightening to them. And as you said, they're not educated in that. It would be really strange to have people that are either going in the sciences or going, to teach English or to be a doctor or nurse or do something. But at the end of the day, they have no clue what this money thing is.
And I've heard a statistic. I'm not sure if I'm getting this right, but you probably correct me. But it said something like in the U.S. at least, there's like a huge percentage of people that don't have enough for like an emergency, like a $400 emergency, just to if something were to come up. And I think it's a huge detonation. People are not thinking in terms of the longer term. They tend to think about just survival, or either bombarded, as you've said, with marketing messages nonstop to purchase things or to buy things that are unnecessary or to live beyond their means. I think that's the trap that most people fall into. Now, as you get older, you decide what's important to you. Is it to spend money on items, or is it to spend money on experiences? I tend to go towards the experience side and spend my money
Yeah.
there, travel and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that education that you're giving to people is invaluable for sure.
Yeah, it is really it's really fun when people tune in and they really understand how simple it is. What happens is that number one, they're really afraid of it. And it's really not that scary. They think it's insurmountable. They can't manage this. They'll never, and they think it's restrictive. Oh my gosh, I've got to have a budget, which means I can't do X, whatever that is, right? The reality is that we actually all have exactly the same goal financially. And it's hard to say that, right? It's hard to listen. You go, what do you mean we all have the same goal? That's not true. Some people want to drive a Mercedes and some people want to drive a Toyota. That's not the key. The key is the same goal that we have is called choices. We all want choices. That's it. And when it comes to having choices where money is a factor, you need to have wealth. And wealth is owning income producing and appreciating assets. That's it. Now, we all have our own because we are our own income producing and appreciating asset because we earn money. And as we get better at doing what we do, we're appreciating. The problem is with when you own you're the only income producing appreciating asset you own. Well, then you're always going to work, which takes away the biggest choice is what to do with your time, right? So
And you're
the
also one step away from a medical emergency or something that could harm
take
that
it away.
income.
So
Yeah.
so then you have that when you to get those income producing and appreciating assets, you've got to have investable capital. And to have that, you've got to manage your money properly so that you systematically build wealth. That's really it. Investable capital buys income producing and appreciating assets that make enough income that replace you. And that gives you all the choices that you want. And you're right about the statistics. Number one, people don't really understand emergency funds. I've written actually a really solid post on that. Um, and it's called the rainy day funds. It's on my LinkedIn profile. And it really breaks down. It actually tells you the math. There's actually three different types of rainy day funds you need to have. But what's really interesting is if you think about the statistics around that, 65% of the people are living paycheck to paycheck. 50% of the people have no retirement assets. 40% of the people have more in credit card debt than they do in savings, right? If you applied those statistics to any other part of our life, it would make the news. Can you imagine if you got on the radio, turn the radio on in the morning, and heard that 60% of the people got flat tires on the way to work today, right? Or 40% of the people's teeth fell out because they didn't have dental, management. They didn't have good dental hygiene. Any part of our lives, whether it's health or managing our vehicle maintenance or our home maintenance or anything else, if the statistics around personal finance were applied to any other important part of our life, it would make the news every day. So it's a really odd deal that we allow that to happen, but it's really by design, right? Because as long as you're not really educated in that world, like the unscrupulous capitalists can keep just taking it away.
If you look to leadership, the country's what, $36 trillion in debt. So it's kind of, it's leading from the top, right? Like the country is in debt. So I mean,
Yep,
people will look to the leaders, right? And it's a debtor nation. People just will always spend, it seems like, beyond their means.
yep. And then by the time it gets painful enough, right, they've let too many of those 90,000 hours go behind them.
Mm.
And now the catch up game is really tough, right? So the earlier you can catch this, and there's always a solution, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to create those choices for your future, right?
Mm.
And that's what the key is. And the way to create those choices is to really wealth equals choices, right? And the basis of that is proper financial management. And the basis of that is having the information and control you need. So really it's a system issue. It's really, we don't have a knowledge issue. I mean, goodness gracious, everybody wants to talk about financial literacy, but at the end of the day, if I give you 100 concepts, you're just going to drown. You only really need four things. So that's the system. You just need a system that where you can manage your finances in 10 minutes a month. And that's what we really created. And that solves a lot of issues.
You often talk about this term response-able rather than responsible. So what's the difference?
I heard that a long time ago and I really hung on to it. We live in a completely, dynamic environment in so many ways. And if you look at whether it is our faith or our relationships or our business or our personal improvement or whatever we're doing, and what's involved, the baseline with all of those things is that there are other people involved and other situations involved. And when somebody takes responsibility, it's not that they're taking responsibility to control their environment. They're taking responsibility to control the only thing they can control, and that's themselves, right? There's only one person in the world that controls me, and that's me. And there's only one person in the world I can control, and that's me. So if I'm responsible, that means I'm able to respond, and I don't have to respond in a way that I don't want to. So whether it's something that makes no sense to me or whether it's something that is trying to influence me, I'm responsible, which means I'm able to have a response that leads me down the path of my objectives and my goals and making sure that I remain within the efficacy of what I want to do.
Now, switching to this topic that's I'm interested in, which is AI, right? There's a lot of fear out there that people are going to be losing their financial income because they're going to lose their jobs. You're seeing layoffs already happen in the tech industry. They'll claim, oh, maybe we're right sizing things post pandemic, but a lot of it, they are finding that they don't need to hire as many people for certain roles, software engineers and customer support people. AI is definitely starting to impact the job market. And you hear leaders in the industry say, we're not talking decades, we're talking 1 to 2 years where you're starting to see a lot of impact with companies looking at how they can automate things and maybe not fire everybody, but potentially, see how they can enable the highest performers to be even, greater performance using the technology. And that could be consultants, customer support reps, as I mentioned, marketers, people in finance now. So what's your take on this whole idea of AI potentially, replacing the need for financial advisors or things that you do? Like where are you
Yeah.
seeing that? What's your
Well,
strategy to look at how to adapt to it?
so number one, let's just kind of define a little bit, like a financial advisor or an investment advisor, those are or a financial planner, they are financial product salespeople. the reality is they exist because of the marketing around them. Because really, if you look at, I think the statistic, if you look at it, I think 8% of managed funds over a 5-year period beat the S&P 500, and they're the different 8% every year, right? And so the reality is, why would you ever have a financial product salesperson? I don't really know. Till today, I can't really find what they're doing except selling you products that you don't maybe need, right? If you're managing your finances correctly, then why would you do that? In terms of the accounting profession, I think the accounting profession is ripe to be taken over by AI. It's putting numbers in boxes is not a really difficult thing. And then AI is even really supplanting now the analytics, right? Which is really the highest form in accounting. You start down at the bookkeeper level, then, you go to a little bit more general ledger accounting and then a little bit more, analytics, but then really you move from analytics into strategy, right? And you're using these numbers and developing strategy. And so I think a lot of that, even touching some of the higher thought processes of that strategy is going to be really challenged coming up. And we're seeing that. And then even now we say, well, can AI dig a ditch? Sure, you have a humanoid robot probably dig it better than I can.
Mm.
You combine robotics with AI, and now really you've got an entire society that can run itself, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
I think it's a huge thing. I think the really important questions are going to, number one, I think, is like any tool or any technology, we can use our powers for good or powers for evil, right? We all know, right? There was a group of scientists that, there's elements that are beneficiary to humans.
Mhm.
And so they programmed their AI and it came up with how many elements, I'm making up a number, 5 million elements that were great for humans. Well, they changed that. It was in a documentary I watched. They changed it from beneficial to humans to detrimental to humans. And by dinner time the next day, there was 5 million elements that would kill us.
Mm.
And so I think number one, there's this a crazy amount of this responsibility of what to do with that. Then, as we go through, could AI make it so that money doesn't exist anymore? Sure. I mean, if you're running an entire society and nobody needs to work, well, if you don't need to work, then you're not going to be compensated for anything. And if you're not going to be compensated for anything, well, then what happens then? Do
Right. The
you
cost of labor
become
drops to like near zero, if not zero.
right? So if your cost of labor goes to nothing and you've got this entire society, at that point, because there always is going to be this group of people that's going to control this in some way or influence it, right? And so if you're controlling that or influencing it, then they're going to have to decide, are they going to destroy society and create really a horrible living situation for everybody, or are they going to create utopia? And you can do either, right? And I'm certainly hoping that we go towards utopia, because we really could create something that would make everybody's lives so wonderful and so amazing. It's kind of a really great story. So I was working in Egypt, and I ended up going to dinner in Cairo with a group of really high end, just business people in Egypt. And this gentleman that I just met, I mean, literally just sat down at the table. And the first question out of his mouth, I couldn't believe anybody would ask this right away, right? He looked at me and said, "So, Nader, what do you think? Is a dictator or a democracy a better form of government?" And I thought, wow, that's an amazing question. And thank God I didn't have an answer. The Holy Spirit spoke. And I said, either one without corruption will work just fine. And so, really, that kind of reminds me of AI. Will AI really be a wonderful thing? Yeah, if we can not corrupt it. And
Mm.
so that's the hope, right?
How are you incorporating AI into your daily workflow? Like, just what are you using it for currently?
I really shied away from it because in the beginning, just transparently, I thought it was just a poor research tool, right? We just went from the Dewey Decimal System to to encyclopedias to Google, and now we've got this AI, and it would just give me back all of these internet searches, and I thought, boy, this is not really fabulous. But very recently, like less than a month and a half ago, I started asking it to help me distribute and market my educational platform, Complete Financial Wellness. because I was kind of stymied. I'm not really a great marketer, and I'm more of a technical person. And so it took all of my curriculums, it took everything. And without going into a 30-minute explanation of what it did, I've been in the business world for, 35 years, and I've paid millions and millions of dollars in consulting fees in different areas. And I would say that it produced about $40,000 worth of consulting in about 2 hours. And I think in that $40,000 worth of consulting would have taken me 3 months to get from another team. I've paid those teams before. I pay them $10,000, $15,000 a month, and it takes them 30 days just to learn what I'm doing. I fed this tool my curriculums, the background, what we're doing, and it even used words that I use when I teach that aren't in any of my curriculums or anything. And I couldn't even. It was hard to. I actually couldn't believe it. And so now it's helping me with all of that. It's built all of my scripts. It's built all of the posts. It's built everything. And it's in my voice, which is even more astonishing. So really, and it's going to end up thousands and thousands and thousands of families. And that's really what I'm after, is helping the working family build a financial fortress around themselves, so that that 90,000 hours, that effort that produces all that value, can go to their family. And so AI is helping me do that faster. It's exponentially faster. I couldn't have produced all of what it did. It's actually breathed a little life into it. So it's pretty neat.
It's good you can have something to bounce ideas off of, on a regular basis. You don't have to wait to contact that expensive consultant. You can just go right to it. And while you're in the flow of work, you can kind of get a reaction from something to, question your assumptions and to challenge you. I think most AIs out there, the big ones, will always try to agree with you. So you do need to have a thought about which AIs you're using and how they're programmed and who's trained them and what's the data in there and how private is the stuff you're putting in there. Think
Right.
about your IP as well. So there's lots of considerations, and people definitely should. I would say advise people don't use the free AI, because you don't know if it's free, then you are the product. So
Right.
just be careful about that. It's a great way that people can use it to educate themselves about concepts, even financial concepts, very quickly. But it doesn't replace the professional who has the experience. Like, people that have some sort of domain expertise will get more out of the AI, because what you put into it, it's going to be more tailored to what you need for the output. If you just
Yeah.
ask it a very simple question and you don't give the right context, because you're not experienced, you're very junior, you're not really sure what to put in there, then your response is not going to be as good. So I think,
No.
it'll be interesting to see who benefits the most from the AI. Is it going to be the people with like decades of experience that know kind of the right way to communicate with humans, but now they're just kind of doing it with the AI, versus maybe someone who doesn't have a lot of life experience yet and they're just coming out of school and they're trying to figure out how to manipulate this thing, how to use it to get some better outcomes, so they're not just, using it to write their homework assignments or whatever.
Right.
So
No, for me it was, and it's exactly what you just said. That's really the case, right? I think the reason that my experience was so positive was what I gave it to work with. It came back and said, "Wow, what you've given me is enough for me to build these artifacts for you." And it actually didn't create anything new. But I'll tell you what it did do, and it did something that a technician like me is not good at, right? Any technician, we have something really that's difficult for us, because there's so much knowledge and so much that we want to share, that we have a very difficult time being concise, right? You ask a 1 second question or a 5 second question, and you get a 2 hour answer, right? Any engineer or anybody like that, So what it did was it took that material, and because it was creating posts and video scripts and emails, it made it concise. It didn't There was actually nothing new. There was no new information that it added, only in one area where it added something really interesting, that I thought was incredibly insightful. But the reality is it took all of my words and made them concise. And I think when you're concise, especially in an environment where you have such a short, attention span today,
Yeah.
uh, that's so paramount. And you know, there's two sides to that, right? We have a short attention span, but the opposite or the good side of that is we're able to ingest and assimilate a lot of information really quickly. The other side of it is there's some things you can't do really quickly. You know, like if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, can you teach me how to fly a plane really quickly?" No, you know, you gotta kill yourself really quickly, even if you do it wrong, right? But the reality is, it takes time to do those things. Sometimes you really have to get a little deeper, but that's one of the places that it really helped me. It really helped me just boil down to here are the really salient points, and here's how quickly we can communicate them.
Excellent. So, final question I have for you is I like to leave people who are watching this with some practical tips. So, you said there's a few questions that like every family should ask themselves that basically helps them to get immediate clarity around their financial, get their financial house in order. What are those questions that every family should be asking themselves?
Yeah. And I'll say it's the questions they should be able to answer. And if they can't answer those questions, then they need to look for a system that will help them answer those questions. It's not a matter of here's a question and the answer to it will do that. The answer will, but the problem is they don't have those answers. So the first question is, where does my money come from today and for the rest of my life? Where's my money coming from? And most people don't know that, right? They look and they go, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. Is it Social Security? Is it a 401k? Is it my assets? How does that all work together, right? So where does my money come from? That's question number one. Question number two is, where's it all going? And you don't want to track it because tracking it is tedious and it's unsustainable. So how do you create a system so you never have to track, right? So where's it all going? That's question number two. And they have to be able to answer that like immediately. The third one is, how do I know? So what reporting system do I have that tells me? Because there's two sides of control. One, you've got to have a system that controls it all. And two, you've got to have the information to make decisions with confidence. So, where's my money come from? Where's it all going? How do I know? And how do I control it? That's it. So if you can control it and you've got reporting and you know where it's coming from and where it's going, that leads you to the result. And the result is you live a financially confident life. I make day to day, second by second decisions with confidence, and I'm planning for my future with confidence. So those are the four questions.
That's great. If people want to get in contact with you or take some of your courses, I know you're doing some courses on Maven. What's the best way to reach you? Financialwellness.com,
Yep.
LinkedIn, right?
Either way, but really, if you go to completefinancialwellness.com, you can link to the courses from there. Also, I've got, on my contact, you can schedule 30 minutes with me if you like. What's really nice is I don't really have a profit motive. This is not how I'm pay bills. This is really something that I'm doing because it's a real passion of mine. And so, yep, there's the first course in complete financial wellness. It's about an hour and a half. I teach all four courses the last Friday of every month. And then there's the master class, which are three classes that teach you how to implement everything you learned in the first course. And so, yeah, completefinancialwellness.com. Feel free to email me. Love to speak with you and help you with clarity and a real system that works.
Great. Well, thank you, Nader. I really enjoyed this. Thanks for helping those families out there who find themselves in situations where they don't have the clarity around their finances. I think that's great work you're doing, and really appreciate the time you spent with me today. And look forward to connecting again soon.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, Sean. That was great.
Great. Thank you, Nader.